20 years ago, my parents threw me out of their house for marrying the man I loved. So they told me I'd made my bed and would have to lie in it, alone. And you know what? They were right. Because last week, when their own perfect 50-year marriage blew up, Kay came knocking on my door for help. And I got to tell them the exact same thing. It's funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? For decades, they preached about the sanctity of marriage, about making the right choices, about family honor. Their entire identity was built on a foundation of judgment, with their own relationship as the gold standard that I had so spectacularly failed to meet. I was the family cautionary tale. The daughter who threw her life away for a man they decided was unworthy. And for a long time, I think a part of me believed them. Not about Mark, my husband, but about the price of my decision. The price was my family. The price was being completely and utterly alone. But what they never understood is that in the silence of their absence, I built a life they could never have given me. A life of real partnership, of hard-won success, and a quiet, unshakable peace they know nothing about. So when they showed up on my doorstep, their own perfect lives in flames, asking for the daughter they threw away. The irony was so thick. You could choke on it. They needed me. And for the first time in 20 years, I had all the power. The silent years, the first few years, were brutal. The shock wore off, and the harsh reality of being disowned set in. Mark and I had nothing. I had one duffel bag, and he had his meager savings. We were just two kids trying to survive a storm. We found a tiny, run-down apartment on the worst side of town. The paint was peeling. The plumbing was a joke. And our furniture was a mattress on the floor and two lawn chairs we found on the curb. I had to drop out of college. We couldn't afford it. I got a job as a waitress, and yeah, the irony of my father's comments about Mark's mom wasn't lost on me. Mark, on top of his classes, delivered pizzas late into the night. There were nights I'd lie awake. Listening to sirens, and the weight of their rejection would just crush me. I felt like I had a giant invisible sign on my back that said unwanted. I grieved for the family I lost. It was this deep, primal wound, and some days it felt like it would never heal. But I had Mark. He was my rock, my chosen family. When I'd break down, he'd just hold me and say, "Their love was a cage. Now we're free." He never once complained. He saw our struggle as the price of our freedom. He'd come home exhausted and still find the energy to make me laugh. We learned to find joy in small things, like a shared pizza on payday or finding $1 on the sidewalk. Our love wasn't built on parental approval. 'Twas forged in adversity. It was real. Slowly, we started to build a life. I got my GED and started a graphic design program at a community college, taking classes at night. Mark graduated and got his first teaching job at an inner-city high school. The pay was awful, but he was passionate. He was making a difference, which is more than my father ever did with all his money. Our first real win was moving into a slightly better apartment, one where the heat actually worked. Then I graduated and landed an entry-level job at a small marketing firm. It felt like climbing a mountain 1 inch at a time. Every step was a victory we earned together, without a single penny from the people who were supposed to be my safety. We got married at the courthouse with 2 of Mark's friends as our witnesses. I wore a simple white dress I'd bought on clearance. No flowers, no reception, no proud father to walk me down the aisle. And yet, it was the happiest day of my life. We were a family. We were enough. Years passed. The constant struggle began. To ease my graphic design career took off. I had a knack for it and a work ethic born from having no other choice. I eventually took a leap of faith and, with Mark cheering me on, started my own freelance business from our spare bedroom. It was terrifying at first, but it grew. My reputation spread. Mark became the head of the history department at his school. We were finally comfortable. We bought a small, modest house in a quiet neighborhood, a home filled with the peace my childhood home never had. And then we had our kids, a son, then a daughter. Holding my son for the first time, I felt this love so fierce and unconditional it took my breath away. I vowed he would never, ever have to question my love. My children would grow up knowing their worth wasn't based on who they loved or the path they chose. The silence from my parents remained absolute. 20 years. Not one phone call, not a birthday card. Nothing when they must have heard they had grandchildren. Was a complete erasure. In a way, the silence became a strange gift. It freed me from hoping for their approval. I was no longer just their daughter. I was Mark's wife, a mother, a business owner. I had built a new family, a chosen family that was stronger and more real than the one I was born into. The betrayal to really get how audacious their request was. You have to understand the family I grew up in. On the surface, everything was perfect. We had the nice, manicured suburban home. My father was a respected local businessman. My mother was a pillar on her social committees. Their marriage was seen as flawless. It was a trophy they polished for the whole world to see. They weren't just a couple, they were a team, a united front. Their love story was the cornerstone of our family's mythology. But under that glossy surface, things were different. Theirs wasn't a partnership built on love so much as it was on agreement. They agreed on politics, on religion, on social standing, and most importantly, on the proper way to live. In our house, love wasn't a feeling. It was a reward for being compliant. It was conditional. As long as I was the daughter, they expected good grades, respectable hobbies, always polite, was showered with affection. The second I stepped out of line, the warmth just vanished, replaced by a cold, silent disapproval that was so much worse than yelling. They weren't raising a daughter. They were curating an extension of their pristine image. And then I met Mark. I was 20 in college, just starting to figure out who I was. Mark wasn't from their world. His family didn't have a recognizable name. His dad was a mechanic, his mom a waitress, was working 2 jobs to put himself through school to become a history teacher. To my parents, this wasn't ambition. It was a shocking lack of it. The first time I brought him home, the verdict was in. It wasn't one thing they hated. It was everything. My father would ask him these pointed questions about his prospects, his voice just dripping with condescension. A history teacher, he'd say, letting it hang in the air like a bad smell. A noble profession, I suppose. Not exactly lucrative, though, is it? My mother was more subtle. Her disapproval came in 1,000 tiny cuts. She'd comment on his clothes, the way he held his fork, his unfamiliarity with the right schools, or vacation spots. They didn't see a person. They saw a symbol of everything they looked down on. He was working class, unpolished. In their eyes, he was beneath me, beneath them. You could feel their fear of what the neighbors would think, of how my choice would tarnish the family name. But I was in love. For the first time, I saw a life beyond their narrow little path. Mark saw me. Not the businessman's daughter, but the girl with a passion for art and a wicked sense of humor. He listened to my dreams because he was actually interested, not because he was calculating their earning potential. With him, I didn't feel like an accessory. I felt like the main character in my own story. The more they pushed against him, the closer we got. Our relationship became my first real act of rebellion. The tension in our house became suffocating. Every dinner was an interrogation. Every phone call ended with a warning. "You're throwing your future away," my mother would whisper, her voice full of this fake sorrow that was really just disappointment. "We only want what's best for you." That phrase, "we only want what's best for you," is such a powerful tool of manipulation. It's designed to make you feel guilty for wanting something different. It reframes their control as your protection. Oh, they weren't protecting me. They were protecting their investment. The final confrontation came just after my 21st birthday. Mark and I were talking about getting a small apartment after graduation, and I made the mistake of mentioning it at dinner. The silence was glacial. My father put his fork down very slowly. He looked at my mother, and they had one of their silent conversations perfectly aligned in their judgment. Then he turned to me. "This has gone on long enough," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "This isn't a discussion. You will end this relationship tonight." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at my mother, pleading for some sign of softness. There was nothing. Her face was a mask of cold resolve. "I can't do that," I whispered. "I love him, love." My father scoffed like the word was disgusting. "You're a child. You don't know what love is? You know what obligation is? You have an obligation to this family. Do not throw it all away on some grease monkey's son." The cruelty of it just stole my breath. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. "His name is Mark, and he's a better man than you'll ever be." That was it. The line was crossed. My father stood up, his face turning purple with rage. "Fine," he spat. "If that's the life you choose, go live it. But not under my roof. Not with my money. You have a choice right now. It's him or it's us." I looked at him, then at my mother standing beside him like a soldier in his army of two. This wasn't a debate. It was an expulsion. "I choose him," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "Then get out," my mother said. The only words she spoke. "Pack a bag. The rest will be disposed of." Being thrown out by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally is a soul-crushing kind of pain. I went to my room on autopilot, my mind just reeling. I threw some clothes, a few books, and a picture of me and Mark into a duffel bag. When I came downstairs, they were waiting by the door, not to say goodbye, but to make sure I left. My father held the door open. "You made your bed," he said, his voice empty of any emotion. "Now lie in it. Don't call, don't write. You are no longer our daughter." The door clicked shut behind me, and my old life ended. I was standing on the porch, an exile at 21, and I had never felt so alone. The return the call came on a Tuesday, unknown number. I almost ignored it. "Hello?" A hesitant voice on the other end. "Is this Melia?" The voice was older, thinner, but I knew it instantly. It was my mother. After 20 years of pure silence, her voice on my phone was like seeing a ghost. "This is she," I said, my own voice sounding strange to me. There was a long pause. It's your mother. What do you even say to that?" "Hello," felt stupid. "How are?" "You felt insane," she finally continued. "I know this is unexpected. I wouldn't be calling, but something has happened. Your father and we need to talk to you." The nerve? Not an apology. Not even an acknowledgement of the 2 decades of pain. It's just a summons. A part of me wanted to scream and hang up. But another part, a morbidly curious part, agreed to meet. I had to know what could possibly shatter 20 years of their stubborn pride. We met at a coffee shop. I saw them in a corner, and I almost didn't recognize them. The imposing figures from my memory were gone. In their place were 2 tired, defeated old people. My father was stooped. My mother looked small and fragile, her eyes puffy and red. The fortress of their perfect marriage had clearly crumbled. I sat down. The silence was thick with everything left unsaid. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice cracking. "Your father. He's leaving me." The words just hung there. I stared. At her, my father didn't deny it. He just kept staring into his coffee. "After 50 years, she said, a tear rolling down her cheek. "He's been seeing someone. A younger woman from his office. He's spent our savings on her. He took out a second mortgage on the house. He wants a divorce, so that was it." The gold standard marriage, the one they held up as the pinnacle of righteous living, was a sham. A pathetic cliché. I felt a cold knot of something that wasn't sympathy form in my stomach. It was vindication. My father finally looked up, his face full of resentment. "She's exaggerating. The marriage has been over for years. We were just keeping up appearances." "Keeping up appearances!" my mother shrieked. "We had." A life, a perfect life, and you threw it all away. They started bickering right there in the coffee shop, a flood of accusations pouring out. It was ugly and messy. Their whole perfect united front had just been a show. I sat there and listened, my mind reeling. Every harsh word they'd ever said to me, every judgment, all of it was built on a lie. After a few minutes, my mother seemed to remember I was there. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. And then came the real reason for the meeting. "Amelia, honey," she began, reaching a trembling hand toward me. I pulled my own hand back. "We're in a terrible situation. The house has to be sold. The lawyers are so expensive. I have nowhere to go. I was hoping I could come stay with you. Just for a little while." I just stared at her, dumbfounded. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted to live in the house I bought with my unworthy husband, to be supported by the life I built from the ashes she helped create. My father, not to be outdone, chimed in. "And I could use some help too," he said, looking at me with a hint of his old command. "A loan for the legal fees. It's the least you could do. You've obviously done very well for yourself. We are still your family, after all. We are still your family." Those words, all the pain, all the struggle, all the lonely nights of the last 20 years just crystallized into a single point of cold, hard rage. I thought about the night they threw me out, about Mark working himself to exhaustion, about my courthouse wedding, about my children whose grandparents didn't even know their names. I took a slow sip of my coffee, looked at my mother's desperate face, then at my father's entitled one. And a sense of calm settled over me. The wounded 21-year-old was gone. In her place was a 41-year-old woman who knew exactly what she was worth. The vindication I let the silence hang, watching them squirm. They came here expecting the dutiful daughter to fall back in line now that they needed something. They miscalculated badly. "Okay, let me get this straight," I began, my voice perfectly even. "For 20 years, you've made it clear I'm not your family. You erased me. You had no idea if I was alive or dead. You've never met my husband, the man you hated so much, and you've never met your own grandchildren. Is that about right?" My mother flinched. My father just glowered. Now," I continued, leaning in, "your perfect life falls apart because of your own choices. Your marriage, the one you held over my head like a weapon, is exposed as a hollow sham. And you have the nerve to show up here, not with an apology, but with your hands out, asking me to clean up your mess." I paused. "You want my help? You want my money? Do you want to stay in my home? We're your parents." My mother wailed. "You have a duty?" "A duty." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "It's rich. Let me tell you what you taught me about duty. You taught me that family is conditional. You taught me love gets revoked if someone doesn't meet your expectations. You taught me that when someone makes a choice you don't like, you throw them away." I looked my father right in the eye. "You told me I made my bed and I had to lie in it. Remember that? It was the last thing you ever said to me." He looked away. "Well, you were right," I said. "I did make my bed. It was hard at first. It was cold and lonely and terrifying. But my husband, Mark, the man you despised, he was there with me. He kept me warm. He worked his fingers to the bone for us, okay? And together we turned that hard bed into a beautiful life. We built a home filled with real love, not the performance art you called a marriage. I made my bed, and I absolutely love the life I am lying in." I turned to my mother, "And now you have made your bed. Both of you, a messy, ugly bed of your own making. And you will lie in it alone." The finality in my voice just sucked the air out of the room. My mother's mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. "So, to be perfectly clear," I said, standing up, "the answer is no. I will not give you money. You will not stay in my home. I will not be involved in your disgusting, overdue divorce." I pulled a 20 out of my purse and put it on the table for the coffees. However, I said, twisting the knife just a little. In a way, I absolutely will support your divorce. I support you finally ending the 50-year lie you've been living. I support you facing the consequences of your own actions, just like I had to. I support you learning way too late in life what it feels like to be truly alone. That is the full extent of my support. Consider it the last lesson I'll ever take from you. Their faces were a mixture of stunned disbelief and powerless rage. They expected tears, or maybe that I'd just cave. They'd never expected this. A calm, absolute rejection from a position of strength they never saw coming. I walked out of that coffee shop and I didn't look back. As the door swung shut, I felt this, wait, I didn't even know I was still carrying, just lift off my shoulders. It was the weight of their judgment. For the first time in 20 years, it was completely gone. I felt free. They say living well is the best revenge. I have a life filled with a love and a peace that they will never understand. And that's worth more than any approval they could have ever offered. What do you think? I'm curious to know what would you have done in my situation. Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe for more. The journey from that night on the porch to this moment was long. For years, the trauma of their abandonment showed up as anxiety and a deep-seated fear of rejection. I felt like I always had to prove I was worthy of love. But healing is possible. It didn't come from them. It came from the unconditional love of the new family I built with Mark. I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who supports you, who loves you for who you actually are. Saying no to them wasn't about being bitter. It was an act of self-preservation. It was the final step in closing a painful chapter and fully embracing the peace I worked so hard to build.